we're kicking it off actually with one of our Innovation Star Award winners. So Rachel, you want to come up and take it away for us?
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. Now everyone's all way back there. I am a little bit sick, so maybe that's a good idea that you're all way back there. I won't spread my germs too much. But I know I am short too, so hopefully you all can see me. And yes, I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about what you heard Dave say that we've worked with HighRoad doing, which is a customized e-newsletter. And I'm really honored to have been recognized by them for this, although I almost feel like we need to give them an award because it's really their innovation that we just kind of embraced. And so I'm hoping to show you how we went through the process and what the results have been so far and where we're looking to go from there. So our problem was about a year ago, right around this time last year, we started to really recognize that we had a little bit of a problem. So let me back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about ourselves. I'm with the New Jersey Society of Certified Public Accountants. We're an individual member association. We have about 15,000 members, most of whom are CPAs. We also have a category of membership for those who are in the process of obtaining their CPA license and even accounting students in college. We were sending 1.8 million emails per year. So that averages out to 120,000 per member, comes out to 10 per member per month, which basically means we were sending a marketing message every other business day to every member. We felt that was way too much because those numbers don't even include transactional emails and emails from our community platform. So it's very likely that there were members getting at least an email a day, if not more than that, from our various platforms. So we also felt we had too many email vehicles as well. So we had 6 email newsletters, 2 of which went to all members, and then 4 were for specific segments of members. And then, of course, dozens of the standalone marketing e-blasts. I hate to say that word too, right? Things like that. So the other problem was that the emails were not, with one exception, they were not responsively designed. So the mobile experience was really poor. And we had recently gone through a rebranding, and the new brand was not implemented into those emails. So we really had no brand continuity across all of our communication vehicles. So that, of course, is also a problem. So what our solution was is that when we were at we're in Aptify is our AMS. We were at our Aptify users conference around this time last year, and we heard Reggie talk about this e-newsletter that they were putting together that was customized based on their constituents' areas of interests and the sections that they belong to. And I do apologize, I had to step out while Reggie was speaking, so I may repeat some of what he said. I'm gonna I assume I've heard him talk about it before, so I'm gonna assume I know what he told you all, but some of it might be a little crossover. But at any rate, we knew, and I think, Ron, I talked to you right at the conference and said, we're next, sign us up, we wanna do this next. And so we got started last December. And so the process was, we knew we wanted to rebrand our newsletter. We wanted to consolidate. We identified 3 of the e-newsletters that we could eliminate and consolidate into one, and I'll show you what those were in a minute. And then we wanted to, we already had so much data about our members, and we were already doing a pretty good job of segmenting our individual event marketing emails and other emails based on that criteria in their records, their areas of interest, their demographics, but we weren't doing that with the newsletters. It was a one-size-fits-all thing, which certainly was not effective. So the 3 newsletters that we identified to get rid of was e-news was a biweekly newsletter that all members would get. It basically contained the really hot professional news affecting CPAs, things that the IRS had come out with, and so on. You can kind of think of how exciting that content is. We also included our job postings in there. And then we had a monthly e-newsletter that was for our members age 35 and under, and that contained kind of what we called softer topics on career development and professional speaking skills and writing skills and things like that. And then Tomorrow's CPA was for our college accounting students, so that covered topics such as what it's going to be like to take the CPA exam, how do you get an internship, what's it going to be like when you start your career. The idea behind them was that every person who received eYoung CPA and Tomorrow's CPA also received e-news, because that went to all members. So each of these people were getting 2 newsletters at the minimum. There's not really any crossover between the bottom 2, but we felt why can't we present the young CPA specific content and the accounting student-specific content within an overall newsletter and not have to send separate vehicles. So this might be a little hard to see, but this is just a visual of what they look like. And yes, they are ugly. I can tell you that. They certainly, as I mentioned, they were not responsive, not fun to read on a mobile device. This was e-news, the one that went to all members. And then these were the two monthly newsletters. So yeah, not pretty, not effective, and we knew we could do better. So our process was we had a bunch of different things going on at the same time. So I mentioned we had gone through a rebranding with a third-party organization, and they had mocked up what they thought a new e-newsletter could look like for us. And so we turned that design, it was basically like a Photoshop file, over to HighRoad, and their team that develops their actual responsive emails took it, broke it apart, put it back together. So that while they were working on that, we had to work on our taxonomy. So I know Reggie talked to you guys about a little bit about how they developed their taxonomy. We had pieces of it in place already. I'm sure a lot of you have like areas of interest or specialties that your members can check off. And so we've had that for years and years. We probably have about 80 areas of interest. So we knew that was kind of the starting point, but we needed a little more than that. So not only did we need that, we needed some demographic criteria. So CPAs, when you hear CPA, you probably think tax return preparer, right? And there's certainly a whole lot of them that do that, but there's also a big portion of our membership that work in corporations as a CFO or a controller or a staff accountant, that sort of thing. So we needed to be able to break down some of that type of criteria so I could tag content for those type of people. And then we also needed to be able to tag the content for what section of the newsletter it needed to appear in. So we developed this big taxonomy, which we implemented, which is this next thing, our content repository. We're basically using two different systems to track the content. One of them is Sitefinity, which is our content management system, and that's really where all the sort of news and article content goes, as well as the banner ads. And then Aptify, our AMS, is where we have all of our event information and our job postings. So we were able to implement the taxonomy in both systems so that it's talking the same language and sending the data over to HighRoad in a cohesive way so that it can send the newsletter out. Then Ron and I got started on how do we share all this data, and that was a little bit fun, right? How do we make sure all the feeds of the different information are coming over correctly, tagged correctly, so that when each person's newsletter goes out, it gets populated with the right information. And I always like to mention this because honestly, one of the hardest things on our end was coming up with a name for this new publication. I mean, if any of you have gone through naming a newsletter or a magazine or something, you probably can feel our pain. And it really took actually quite a long time. And we finally came up with one that we like, which is Pulse. So our acronym is NJCPA, so it's NJCPA Pulse. So this just gives you an idea of our taxonomy. So you can see module tells the content where it belongs in the publication. So these are the different sections of it, which I'll show you a visual of the publication in just a little bit. We have membership type. So you probably can't necessarily see this, but there's all of our regular member types. And then we have two non-member types. There's non-members who are CPAs, meaning they're eligible for membership. And then there's non-members who are not CPAs. One of the things that we decided to do with this publication was the previous ones were you had to be a member to get them. With this new one, we're opening it up to non-members and kind of using it as a recruitment tool. So we now know that if somebody is a non-member but is eligible for membership, I can insert a piece of content in their version of the newsletter that sells membership. Then we have some different segments and demographics, as I was mentioning before, whether they're in public practice, they work for a corporation, for government, maybe they're an accounting professor, accounting student, which is how we're going to tag the content that those people used to get in their own newsletter, and young professional, same thing. That's how we're kind of using the criteria. New members, if we want to put in something specifically for them. And then the last three under member segment, this is one of the other really cool things about how Ron helped us set all this up, is that the bottom three under member segment were not there in the beginning. And I realized as I started sending this that I had a need for those three segments. And with the way that it was set up, I didn't have to involve HighRoad or Ron at all. We set them up on our end, and the feed now comes over containing that information. And I can tag content now because we started to develop some event programming that's specifically for women. And I thought it was silly that I would be including that for all members. You know, we're saying this newsletter is customized. Why would a man be getting an invite to a women's breakfast? And then the dues is an interesting one because with our previous newsletter, we have a very lax or a very generous renewal grace period. So it's almost 6 months that you can still remain a member getting membership benefits before we terminate you. But over the last few years, we started cutting off and stop sending them e-news. And so we wanted to do the same thing with Pulse, except that they get a warning. So in their last issue before it's going to get cut off, I used to manually put in a content item. And now with this segment, I'm able to put that in, and it only shows up for the people that, according to our AMS, still owe dues. So that was a good one. There's a few roles that we track for people specifically at CPA firms. There's different functionality that they have there, and some of those are really related to non-members, like the HR person or the marketing person at a CPA firm. We have some programming and stuff that we like to alert them about, so I'm able to segment that. And then this is just a very, very small segment of our areas of interest. Didn't need to bore you with all the CPA-specific areas of interest, but you get the idea. Accounting and auditing, there's tax stuff, and technology and all sorts of things like that. So before I get into showing you what it actually looks like, I can just kind of share with you some of our initial results. So we launched it back in May. It goes to about 15,000 people. Oh, that's nice. I have a little typo there. 15,000 people. We're at, right now, between a 28 and 29% open rate. It's not as high as I maybe hoped it would be by this point, but I think we just still have to give it some more time. E-news prior to this hovered in the 27% open rate. So we're a little bit higher. I think the biggest thing is that we haven't gotten any complaints. So I always think that's a success because people will call you to complain. They won't call you to compliment you typically. As I mentioned, it's a very flexible platform. So I'm able to kind of tweak things without having to submit a ticket for help or anything like that. There's certain things that I can add in and take out as we go along and decide how we want to use this publication. And also, as I mentioned, we are using this as a recruitment tool. We're actually starting a new robust recruitment campaign our marketing manager has set up. And a big component of it is, while yes, you can become a member, maybe if you're not ready to do that yet, you can subscribe to Pulse. And so it's really, we're giving each person 2 options. And Pulse is right there in the forefront as something that they can do with us. And then we'll pepper in that sales messaging to them about becoming a member and what the benefits are over the course of their time. We're going to give them a 1-year subscription. We'll decide a year from now whether we want to let them continue the subscription or if we want to send a message out saying, hey, your 1 year is up. Do you want to stay with us? Do you not? We have a little bit of time to think about that, but we're hoping to see, hopefully, that it's successful and that they kind of get a little taste of the organization by getting the free newsletter, and then they'll be enticed to join, hopefully. So I have what it looks like up here on the screen. Now I know for the virtual people, I'm going to actually bring up better screenshots of this, and I'm going to scroll through. We'll provide those PDF files to the virtual people. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see them on the screen right now, so I apologize in advance for that. And what I'm going to bring up is 2 different versions of the same exact newsletter. So actually, let me back up and just talk about the process of how it goes out. So it uses HighRoad's transactional engine instead of the marketing side that we all kind of use for our static content emails. And so if you think about a transactional email, such as an event registration confirmation, it's basically doing a word merge, for lack of a better comparison. So it's pulling up person number 1 and saying, thank you for registering for insert event, insert date, insert time, send off the email, move on to person B and insert that. So it's the same exact idea with Pulse, is that the system is pulling up member number 1 or recipient number 1, and it's pulling all of their criteria, all of their tagging, all their areas of interest, their demographics, and then it's pulling all the content that applies to them, plopping it in, sending out that issue to that person, moving on to person B. So it's sending out 15,000 individually built newsletters every time it goes out. And it actually went today, so it went out successfully, I can say. It's really nice because it is a hands-off process as far as it actually going out. I enter the content pretty much on a daily basis, and if anyone's interested after the fact, I can share with you how I set it up in Sitefinity to store all of the content, but I'm basically adding it in and using a publication date and expiration date, which determines which issue it's going to go in. And so I do that. It takes me about 30 seconds to add a piece of content, and I do that over the course of the 2 weeks leading up to the issue. And then when the issue goes out, I'm not doing anything. It's just going out. Ron has it scheduled to go out, it goes. And it just pulls whatever content I have in there. So it's really pretty cool. So this is what the publication looks like. So it's visually quite different than what I showed you before. It incorporates all of our new branding guidelines, colors and fonts and things like that. So the very first section here is an optional section that's sort of an alert or a warning area that I can choose to have something in there or not. That's where I put, when it was the members who hadn't paid their dues, that it was going to be their last issue, and that was right up there for them to see. We do get members renewing every year when we do that, so it's an effective tool. Then we have the featured news section, which is the first main section of the newsletter, and it contains up to 3 items with the headline, a little blurb, and an image. And the way that I have this set up is I can control the order in which these appear because it's based on the publication date of the item when I add it into Sitefinity. So even if I added something a week and a half ago, but I feel it's the most important thing, I could have changed its publication date to this morning so that I knew it would be the top item for somebody. Now again, this is all custom based on the recipient. So if I pull up this other version that went to a different person on the same exact day, we can see that they only had 2 items that fit their criteria for featured news, and they are entirely different than what this person had. Not entirely different, there is 1 repeat. You can see there's person 2, there's person 1. Then the next section down is society news, and that's for any programs or services or anything that we want the person to know about. This is where, for the non-member version, it would include messaging about why you might want to join. And we switch up the messaging. It's not always a hard sell, join, join, join. It might be highlighting one member benefit, and it's an enticement to join. So this one obviously went to somebody who was a young professional. This one as well. They happen to match these 2. We have several banner ad spots available, and that is also controlled in Sitefinity. I'm able to enter the banner ad information and tag it also. There's several different locations within the newsletter where banner ads can go, so I'm able to tag it using a taxonomy of where it goes, where the image is hosted, and where it should click through to when they click it. Then we've got more news, which is basically an overflow area. Anything that I think is still important to include, but not important enough to go in the featured news or the society news section. And this is limited to 10 items. So again, I'll pop back and forth here to the other person, and we'll see they only have 7 that they qualified for. This person, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. So, and they will totally vary depending on their criteria. Here is another banner ad spot. Sometimes they're house ads, sometimes they're sold ads. The next section is events, and this section is pulling directly out of our AMS as opposed to Sitefinity. So we already enter, CPAs have to take continuing education, I should mention that. So we run upwards of 600 different events a year. And so rather than having to take certain events and enter them into Sitefinity, we're just pulling directly from Aptify. We're already tagging all the events based on areas of interest. So this just brings up I think it's the next 4 or 5 events that meet the person's areas of interest. If a person, by the way, does not have any areas of interest with us, they still get a newsletter. It's going to be fairly bare bones. I'm able to put in content regardless of areas of interest. So for example, if it's time to renew your CPA license, that applies to all CPAs regardless of whether they're interested in tax or financial statement. So I can put in content that has no areas of interest but goes out to people based on other criteria. So the newsletter is never going to be empty, but it's a lot more robust if they have updated their areas of interest. And then the last section is jobs. And this is the only one that's not customized based on the person because we really don't have a way of knowing which members are looking for a job at any given time and what kind of job they're looking for. So we just include the 7 or 8 most recent postings to our job bank for everybody. We used to do that in the previous newsletter. It's always a popular section. So it is at the bottom, though, so it's not obtrusive to people who it just doesn't apply to, but the ones that it does, they know it's there, and they can scroll down and get it. So those are the basics of how the newsletter is built, how it's populated, how it differs on a person-to-person basis. And then as far as tracking the results and the click-throughs and that sort of stuff, we're able to get the delivered and open rates through the HighRoad system. Again, it's in their transactional engine, so it is tracked a little bit differently. And traditionally, you're not really tracking clicks on transactional emails. So we ended up developing a slightly separate way to track the clicks using Google Analytics. It was a little bit of trial and error there as well, because what happens is that some of these items that I put in the newsletter, I do a lot of content curation, because it's a lot of content that can go into a newsletter, and we don't develop that quantity of content. But there's a lot of good accounting-related publications out there where I find an article that I know our members would be interested in, and I can include that, but the link goes directly to that third-party site. So it would bypass our Google Analytics. I would never know that that article was clicked on. So we actually just created a quick redirect page on our own website. So every article in here hits our website with certain criteria in the URL to capture that, and immediately pushes them off to the ultimate destination. So that's been really helpful. I've been able to see, what has resonated with people and what hasn't. You have to change your mindset, because in a traditional static e-newsletter, there are 20 items in the newsletter. Everybody's going to get those 20 items, and you can see how many times each one was clicked on. In this case, unless I delve into the data, I don't know offhand exactly how many people are going to receive each content item. I just know how many times they've been clicked on. And that's really the important thing to me. And again, I could certainly delve in and say, okay, this piece, the way I tagged it, is going to match with 4,000 members, and 600 of them clicked on it, and I can figure out the rate there. But I've so far really just been looking at the clicks, the opens, and the deliverability rate. So as far as the results, let me pop back over to the PowerPoint. And so there's a few things that we are looking ahead on with this newsletter. And we know we can do more. And so I had mentioned, I think at the beginning, that we had 6 e-newsletters, and we identified 3 of them to eliminate, which means we still had 3. One is to consumers about financial literacy. So that's never going to be part of this. But the other 2 are a monthly newsletter that goes out with our calendar of events. It's actually very similar looking to an example that Justine showed yesterday that a client had sent in with tons and tons of events. Ours is probably even worse than that one. It's a bad offender of good email practices. And then the other one is each of our 11 chapters gets a monthly e-newsletter. So we were thinking that we would want to test including chapter content in Pulse. So obviously each person's only a member of one chapter, so could we have a chapter section in Pulse and just include that information and eliminate the separate chapter newsletters? And we certainly can, but the problem is that out of all of our emails, the chapter newsletters perform the best. So we're not sure we want to mess with that too much. And then the other one with the CPE, there's so many events in it that I can't even quite grasp how we could effectively include that information into Pulse, even using the taxonomy and narrowing it down. So where I'm kind of at now is thinking we leave Pulse as sort of the informational newsletter, and we combine the chapter and monthly event one into one event-based marketing newsletter that, again, is customized based on the person's interests that way. So again, it's a little different than what you're seeing on this slide, because I've just recently been thinking I'm not sure it makes sense to combine all of those things into one newsletter. I think it might become really, really long, even if we increased it to weekly. So again, we're kind of tweaking things and looking at things as we go along and changing the game. So that's basically my presentation. I'm happy to, I don't know where we are with time with our little intermission there. Certainly can answer any questions anyone has.
Any questions?
Great presentation. It's amazing what you're doing. So how will you know whether or not, what's your turning point of whether or not you'll combine or keep those publications separate? How are you determining that
Yeah,
answer?
what we originally thought we might do is that second phase was to test the chapter content, where we would put the chapter content into Pulse but still keep the newsletters and see how it performed in each. So that was going to be a good method, except now I'm thinking it doesn't even make sense to put it in there. So I'm not even sure we need to do much testing at this point. I think we'll probably proceed. It's actually our budget time right now, so I actually already allocated some money to do that second newsletter, that second standalone event-based newsletter. So I think that's the route we'll be going.
Woohoo!
Yeah!
Fire alarms, let's go. Anybody else? Any other?
Great job. I can see why you won an innovation award.
Thanks,
It's fantastic. I'm kind of curious. I think they're responsive. The template they use is responsive, right?
Yes.
So you had a horizontal ad in there or a call to action, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Do you have that designed in multiple sizes? So when it reaches a break point, it's going to shift the size of the ad and keep the not break the responsive design?
What we did to kind of keep things simple, because I don't know about you guys, but dealing with these advertisers, especially banks, it's so hard to get good artwork out of them. So we didn't want to ask for all these different versions. So what we did was there's one ad size where the Investors Bank one is there that spans the full width, and all it does is scale down to half size. So we tell them up front what the dimensions are and what it's going to go down to, and it's up to them. We check it, but we tell them make sure it's going to look good when it's down there. The other one, I don't think I had an example up. The other option is we have 2 half-width ads. So if they don't want to pay for a full-size one, they can do a half of one, and that one stays as is because it's about the width of the smallest screen. So they just stack when it's on a phone. But yeah, the whole responsive thing is really interesting decisions to make as to what gets stacked, what gets gone when it's on a small screen, and all that. It's a whole new world.